dev streams. And to our delight, people wanted to see a bunch of stuff. And so we captured those things. Matt painstakingly pulled pieces of chat out into a list. And I think we should just talk about every single one. Sound good?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna get through all of them today, but definitely I would like to. And so the other thing is too, I think as we're going over these, some of these are going to be like tricky to do right now, but hopefully, and I was talking about this earlier, like hopefully these will get easier to do as we start implementing some of the core features, and like eventually we'll be able to like actually just implement some of these on stream. Like I don't think we can do that right now because some of these will be kind of involved, but yeah, let's just start talking about them.
Okay, Mike J. Robbins asked about triggering video playback when models enter a pre-specified zone.
Right. So at the core here, I guess we're like the first question is like, okay, how do we find out when something enters a zone? There's two major ways I can think to do that. There's like, well, just look at the object's position and decide where it is and see if it's in a box we expect or something. So that's just like directly looking at the position of the object. The other way is using the physics system to do this. And while it might seem a bit weird to use a physics system just to decide like where something is or if it's in a box, one of the jobs of a physics system is, well, it needs to know where things are, and it needs to very quickly be able to ask questions about where things are. So physics systems are highly optimized for doing these sorts of spatial queries. So if you did the naive thing, which is just like, okay, is this position in this box? If you wanted to make it performant, where it's like, I want to check lots of objects against lots of boxes and whatnot, what you're going to end up doing is implementing the kind of broad phase detection stuff that a physics system does. You'll basically end up doing a lot of the work that the physics system does early on in a frame to decide what objects are hitting each other. It might still be a good idea depending on what you're doing, but like what we do for media frames, for example, is just use the physics system. So we just say, in order to find out if you have put a thing in a media frame, we just check like, is anything that we care about colliding with a media frame? And so the physics system has this get collisions. So for any object, you can just ask like, what is it colliding with right now? And so for each media frame, we just look through and say like, okay, what is this media frame colliding with? If it's colliding with anything, well, is that something we care about? And so right now we only care about things that are of the media type that matches.
Has a specific media type. Like you can specify in media frames, this is only for videos and images and PDF. Like only 2D media makes sense in this media frame. So we check that. We make sure that it's been loaded. I actually don't know why we do this. I think it's just because we didn't
want to capture like things that are still a loading cube. It just seemed confusing for it to happen. I don't think it.
Oh, maybe because we don't actually know what media type that is while it's loading.
That's true too. We don't yet know what kind of media it is.
We don't capture things that are already captured by another frame.
Right, and that line's pretty cool because like that was very easy to express. In the old media frame system, we had this bug where like sometimes if media frames were near each other and an object was between them, it would just kind of like snap back and forth between the two media frames because we didn't have like a really nice way to express that. And this is like very easy. It's just like, well, do any of my other media frames have this thing? We could have done that with the old code too, but it was just a little bit harder to do. Here it's very naturally expressed. It's like, is it in any other media frames? And we also don't want to capture things that are an ancestor of the thing with the media frame. So like if you have like a nested object with a media frame in it, you don't want the media frame to like capture the thing,
capture its parent, and then
right,
its
and then
parent
will
will
move,
move,
parent,
and then
it moves itself, and then it
gets
just
like
flies
really
off
weird.
We don't actually have a scenario where that could really happen because we right now, well, I guess you could actually, you could create a GLTF file that does that. So that's why we check for that.
Okay, but coming back to the core problem, you're like, well, You need to give the models you care about a rigid body so that physics knows about it, and you need to write a function very similar to what we just saw, where you say, okay, look at my zone. Is my model colliding with the zone? Is the model one that I care about? You might want to have a component for the models that actually do trigger the video playback. And then as far as triggering video playback as opposed to anything else, you could maybe look at the video system and see what we do, or the
Video
video
menu
menu
system.
system, right? If the video is networked, then make sure to take ownership, because otherwise, when your client changes the video state, the playback state, then no one else will care or notice. So you got to, get ownership. But then do whatever you want to do. If you want to just play the video, great. Or pause the video, great. If you
You
want
want to
to,
like play an animation, for example, like we do with play button, well, do that.
yep,
Do like here we're checking for whether you clicked the toggle play button action, but like this could be like if there's a collision with this thing, then do this.
yep.
It's not, there's nothing special about the collision triggering it. It's just another thing that can happen. Like another way you could write this too is like if you want to base it on media frames, for example, you're like, oh well, whenever you put a certain kind, like whenever you put a key into this media frame or whatever, and it snaps into place, then I want to do something. So what you would do is you'd write a system, you'd make a component that's like key trigger or something, and then you put that on the same component or the same entity as a media frame, and then your system can just look through everything that is a media frame and also has this component on it. So you'd write a query for that, and then every frame you just check like, does this media frame have the thing I care about in it right now? And like, did it not last frame? Do something interesting. So like you can build on top of existing systems too. Like if you didn't care, like if you, yeah, I mean that might actually be it really depends on the experience you're trying to make actually. I was gonna say that might be better, but it really depends on what you're trying to do.
I feel like that's enough on this one.
Yeah.
Maybe we can go on to the next. Okay, so Jia Ning Qi wanted to use a webcam and sort of feed. Okay, this is my understanding from Matt's description. Feed like the stream of a webcam into this TensorFlow model that will notice what emotion you are having on your face, so that then the appropriate emojis will spawn into the room. Um, and let's see, I don't know how to like feed the video stream into a TensorFlow model, because I don't know anything about TensorFlow.
Yeah, but I mean, like essentially, we get this. We have a media stream for your webcam. We get that in scene entry manager or something, I think. Well, there's lots of places you could grab it, I guess. But like, I was just thinking about like the earliest spot where we actually create the video stream is in, I think, scene entry manager, where like when you actually click the share webcam button or whatever. So I'd probably grab it there.
Oh, this media devices manager media stream, is that it?
Yeah. But so then I would like get a media stream there. And then like, what do we do with it? It's like,
I can't remember all the details here.
Yeah, this one's tricky. But essentially, once you have that media stream, you can take that and pipe it into your TensorFlow model, and then what you do from there is no different than like, well, how do we spawn emoji right now? You like, well, this is still not using the new system, but like you say spawn this entity, right? So like, just in the same way that we spawn emoji when you hit a key, you could do in response to some other thing. It's like there's not really anything special here. Like there's spawn emoji in front of user. Like that's the thing you would call.
This is the old code, but it could look more like these are calls that I have just for testing locally. Like I spawn these three entities whenever I come into the scene. You could do like create a network entity and use a prefab that is the emoji prefab, and the emoji you want to use is smiley or cry face or thumbs up. And in fact, a very simple way to do it is just to have a bunch of like emoji images
Hmm.
and pass them in as the source URL and then use the media loader for it.
Yeah, and this create networked entity thing is this is the new way to do networked things, and so you just pass it the name of the prefab, and I think we showed this last week during the stream that no one has audio for. If you go into the network, if you go into the network system, um, you can see where we define these prefabs.
Yep.
Um,
Right now, you'll
and
notice there's very few, but
yeah, and there's very few, but you can still express some pretty complicated things with a GLTF file, right? Because like the GLTF file can have components and it can have networked components too. And unlike the current A-frame networked A-frame stuff, these prefabs are not tied to network data anymore. Those are two separate concepts now. So like a prefab just says like, okay, make this thing on both sides. The other thing we have is like, okay, what are the actual components that are networkable? I think we call these schemas here in the new net code. Um,
right.
and so like we only have three kinds of network components right now. There's the transforms, media frames, and these videos, because these are the only things we care about networking right now. But like a network transform, for example, that could exist on anything, and like multiple prefabs have network transforms. Um, so
Right.
in the current networked A-frame system, these two concepts are tied together. Like they're just like, okay, like what is this, the template here is like both what do I spawn, but also what do I network about it? And so you end up having to like create things just because you wanted to network, like you wanted to spawn a different thing, but wanted to network the same information about it. You end up having to duplicate that. Um,
Right.
and
So we have this, for example, emojis. Like the emojis you spawn here have this like little particle system, and the particle system properties change as you shake it, and that change is networked. So we had to, because we have slightly different information that we're networking, we have to have this new schema for it that says, hey, like network the particle emitter in here, and I guess a bit of other information. In the new system, this would just be like spawn this GLTF file, and by the way, this GLTF file has a component in it that gets networked, and it's like the particle system data.
right, and you would not have to change the hubs code at all for that. Like the fact that the particle system is networked would just be a factor of the probably the particle system inflator, or maybe you add a networked particle system component in your GLTF file. But then you'd have another thing, and that just knows how to network particle systems. And it happens to be that this GLTF contains a thing that is a network particle system. But um, you don't have to like it's way more composable than it was before, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Um, how to intercept the data. We didn't do a great job of that, but I don't think we can do a great job of that right now. I think we have to kind of just dig into how to.
I mean, like I said, once you have a media stream, then you should be able to use that to then grab images out of the media stream and stuff. I don't know the details of that at all, but like getting the media stream, uh, I would start with like where we pointed at with the where you spawn your webcam thing, and then from there it's kind of specific to using TensorFlow and whatnot.
Okay, system that I'm going to move on to the next one from Vince, who was asking about system that can hide an object or a link. So a chest that can be opened to reveal a treasure, a pile of rocks that can be blasted to clear a path, things like that. And let's see. I think this is partially um, like something you can click on and then make some other stuff happen. Also, a meta system that sort of keeps track of what things have happened and what the state of the world is, that if someone else joins and you've already blasted the pile of rocks and the path is in, they should all also have that state synchronized as well.
Yeah. Yeah, this one's pretty tricky. There's a lot there's a lot there.
Well, there's like, okay, we can break this apart though. There's like the part that triggers something that can happen, that can change the state of the world. That's like having a clickable thing or a trigger a volume, some way to say the user has done thing,
Hmm.
condition has been met.
And we have some of these as sort of primitives already, like the clickable thing. We have this concept of a single action button or whatever. It's like a thing that I can interact with, and then I know when it's interacted with because it has an interacted component on it. That's how we do buttons right now. And then the trigger volume is that's the thing we talked about above, right? It's like, okay, well, when something collides with this thing, do something. But we should have, yeah, like we should have some helper primitives for that too. So that's like detecting that something has happened. And then what you do once that thing has happened, well, that's like completely up to you. But for this case of like showing and hiding or like playing some animation, like again, it's like really just like, okay, well, when that thing, like have a system that is looking for this thing to happen. When that thing happens, run some code, like start an animation and play it. And then, like you said, you probably also care about that being synchronized. So then we don't have right now, but like what would be nice is a system for like just synchronizing animations generically. So saying like, okay, I've played this animation. It is in this state now. Uh, Everyone should be in that state. And if someone enters the room late, well, like set the animation mixer state to be this current state. Like don't bother animating to it, just set it. This is very similar to what we do for videos, right? So like the video
Yeah.
synchronization stuff, like when yeah, let's just look at the video system. So like the every frame, whoever owns the video just says, here's the current time of the video as far as I'm concerned, this is what it is. And then everyone else just looks at what is the time I got over the network and how does that compare to my time? And if it's like different enough, like I think we have it set to like 3 seconds or 5 seconds or something right now. If it's
Yeah.
like more than that different, well, then I need to synchronize my time. And
Yeah.
the only reason we don't like literally just always apply the time is because, well, there's like network latency and stuff happens. Like you might be buffering the video and like so you haven't started playing it yet. So there's a little bit of like we want to have a little bit of wiggle room because otherwise you'll just constantly be seeking the video and like it'll be choppy or like if you have a slow connection, um, you'll like literally constantly be buffering because you'll never actually get to play. And so it'll be like, oh, I'm still behind. Skip forward, and then it's like load a new section of video. Oh, skip ahead.
Yeah.
So that's what this buffer is about. But like for an animation mixer, it would be very similar. It's like, okay, I want to synchronize the current playback position of this animation, which animation clips are playing, whatever about the animation mixer, and that's how you could do like, oh, okay, like this thing has already exploded, so this animation's already done. And similarly, like opening up paths and stuff, that's going to require like modifying the navigation mesh, but these are all just like
To
it's not
reveal a treasure bit is it's a little funny. Like I don't know if the treasure always exists in the scene and it's networked and it's invisible, or if the player who opens the chest also sends a
to spawn the
create
treasure.
like a spawn message for that treasure, and maybe it's like marked persistent in some way. So if that player leaves, like the treasure stay. I'm not really
Yeah,
sure.
I'm not. I think like having the thing be in the scene in some form um makes sense. uh I mean, you could express this exactly like I said as an animation, right? So it's like, okay, there's the first frame of the animation, the thing is not visible, and then like it animates to become visible, and now there's a treasure there or whatever. And like by synchronizing that state, well, if you enter the room after the treasure has already been discovered or whatever, it's just going to be in that animation state, and then you'll be able to do stuff with it. Um, the clearing a path part, yeah, like that involves right now at least um, modifying which navigation mesh we're using. So you have like actually walking through things. All that's not based on physics; it's based on a nav mesh. And so it's like it says which parts of the scene are walkable. And so like what you could imagine doing if you want to open up a path is you like take the nav mesh that doesn't have the path and swap that for a nav mesh that does have the path and set that as the active nav mesh. I don't remember exactly how we do that, but like if you just search the code for nav mesh or something, um, we
And
never
there,
do this right now, but
I think we also like treat nav mesh special because like we only care about it if it's a nav mesh in the scene. Maybe? Does that ring a bell?
I think we should, but I don't think we do. I think if you bring in a GLTF file with a nav mesh, we like set that as the current nav mesh, and then everything is broken for everyone. Um, so be careful with that. But yeah, and so this
Oh,
is
right. We log an error and then we just do it anyway. We're like, uh-oh, something bad's about to happen.
yeah.
Okay, we will do what you
and
said.
then
We will
and then
swap
as
out the
soon as
nav
everyone
mesh.
walks forward, they all like stand on top of your cube that you made because
Yeah,
like
it's really
now,
funny.
yeah.
It's really good.
Um, uh, but
But
you
there's
know,
this Pathfinder library that we're using now, and you call this like set zone data, and you create a zone from a geometry, and the geometry is the nav mesh. So um, we can, if I were doing this, I would not shy away from just busting open this library and seeing what it's doing because um, I don't think it was like hand optimized or anything like that. And so just it has a few concepts of zones and islands and okay, maybe I shouldn't talk about what I don't remember. Pathfinder.
yeah, I mean the details are going to be pretty tricky to get into because I don't remember them either.
What's nice is that actually this also implements like the path. It's called pathfinding library because you can do like A star pathfinding in this. So if you wanted to do the sim style navigation, I would start here. I would be like, okay, you can click on a part of the geometry. You can and then tell the character to
Yeah,
every
this
frame move a little
actually
bit closer to it.
like teleporting sort of works. Like when you teleport, we see like is there a path to the spot you're trying to teleport to? Actually never mind. We used to do that. I think we now just like check if it's just on the navigation mesh at all.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, you could, this library does support that. We're using it just to kind of keep you bound to the nav mesh, but finding a path from any point to any other point is also like that's kind of like the main point of the library, honestly. So you can use that for like navigation of NPCs or that sort of thing too.
Right. Um,
Yes, three path finding.
okay. I think that's enough for this topic. I think there are several topics below that are similar, so I think we're going to be able to speed up a little bit. But also, I love talking about this stuff. So, all right. Timer that can be started and stopped by the room owner.
Um, Depends what that means. Are there any details on that?
I don't have. I can make some guesses that like maybe everyone wants to see the time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the time is in the scene or on the 2D. I'm actually not
Yeah.
sure. If Matt wants to chime in and tell us more about this one, I don't have Discord open to the.
Yeah, no, this one. So it's more like a teacher classroom situation where the teacher says, "Okay, everybody, you have 30 seconds to find the treasure box," and then the timer goes up, and everybody has to complete that action within that time.
Okay.
Right. Let's see. I guess. So I mean, there's a few ways I can think to implement this. There's the one way which is just like, okay, tell every client to go start a timer. Like you can just send messages, right, to other clients, and so I can just say like, oh, hey, start the timer, or like cancel that timer or whatever. That wouldn't handle with like late joiners. Like if someone joins while a timer is counting down, they wouldn't get it.
Yeah.
So in order to do that, you would have to actually create a networked entity. Right now, we don't really have the concept of like a networked entity without a visual representation. Certainly, you could just do that by just having an empty group node, but it seems a bit silly to even have it be in the scene graph at that point.
But maybe you do want, I mean, I guess if you don't want it to show up, like if you just care about the timer, but if you want people to be able to like see the time in
Yeah, but
the
I'm
world.
thinking more like you want the timer to show up in the 2D UI.
Oh, okay.
But
Hmm.
either way, so like you could still create a prefab. Right now, create a prefab. Maybe there's a way to just like say I want to just create a networked entity that doesn't have a physical representation. But actually, even if it did, you're still going to want to have components on it and stuff. So I think you would still create a prefab. So I would create a prefab that has like a networked timer component on it or something, right?
Yep.
And then I'd have a system that looks at there's an enter query for network timer components or for timer components, and then there's a network timer, which is the actual network state. Whenever a timer component gets created, I create some 2D UI for it and show the timer in the corner. And maybe there's like a stack of timers, right? I can have multiple of them. So like whenever a timer component comes into existence, I show that thing. Whenever it goes away, I get rid of that part of the UI. And then whoever owns the timer, this would be like the person who created it, sends the current state of that timer or whatever. And this is very similar to what we do for videos, right? Like you'd have a local version of that time that ticks itself, and then you'd have like the network state. And if you get too far out of sync, you get rid of it, or you synchronize it. And that one you could be way more lenient on because we don't care about seeking it every time. Like we would always apply the network state. And
Actually, you probably wouldn't even need to count down. You would just say like this timer ends at this time.
Right. Yeah, and then you actually wouldn't even need to synchronize anything about it, right? Like if you just say when it ends, then you don't need to send any updates about it because then you just say like, oh hey, like this thing is there. The reason you would want it to be like, so the way I said to do it first is just send a message to the client and say, hey, create a timer that ends at this time. And then you could easily display the UI for that. The problem with that is if someone joins the room after you've sent that message, you either need to like know to like, well, anytime someone joins the room and I have a timer running locally, like make sure I tell them to start the timer as well. Or they just won't know about it. By using like the normal networking state and ownership stuff, you would get the fact that like, okay, whenever anyone joins the room, they would just get naturally by the existing networking rules, the current state of that thing. And the state of that thing, like you said, could just be the end time. And so like once you create it, there might not be anything else to tell them about it.
If it's like 30-second timers, maybe you can get away with like latecomers just don't get that timer. And like they miss the first one because, well, they joined. If it's longer than that, then you want to make sure to care about late joiners.
Yeah. But either way, this is just another a piece of network state, and then you do with it what you want.
Yeah. When the timer's up, do what you want to do.
Right, and that like, if you want to spawn a thing, for example, the person who should spawn the thing should just be the person who owns the timer, not everyone. But if you want to play a sound, you can probably just do that locally, right? Each person plays the sound locally without having to worry about networking.
Mm-hmm.
It is a bit tricky with the ownership thing. If you could transfer ownership of the timer, then it's like multiple people might spawn the thing, and that gets tricky.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's actually a requirement for this. Interactable network camera object.
Okay, so there's some extra context here because we do in fact have this, but the ask for this next one is imagine there's a racetrack in Hubs and all the there are a group of participants running around the racetrack, and then there are people in the audience sitting in the stadium, and they want to look at a Jumbotron, and in the Jumbotron see the perspective of each of the participants and like flip between them.
So a nice thing about the way I was describing how the networking system is not tied to the prefabs and stuff anymore, like the network state is separate from the things you can spawn. We can express this right now without even any new concepts from what we have, right? If I create a scene with a video texture target and a video texture source in it, and when I say right now, I mean like once all this stuff sort of lands. But like if I load a GLTF in the new model, the new way of loading things, I have a video texture target and video texture source, and those right now just like, okay, this video texture source is a camera, like a 3GS camera, and it will show whatever this thing is showing on that video texture target. You can do this right now. You know, in the outdoor festival scene, for example, you can see like there's a stage, and whoever's on the stage is projected onto the screens, right? So you can already right now, I know Jim has shown this off during the meetups and stuff. You can animate that camera. You can do whatever you want with it, right? It's just a node in the scene graph, and I can move it around. And so like you can have a pre-canned animation where it's just running around and it's moving, and you'll see that on the screen. What's nice now though is because networking state is not linked at all with the prefabs and stuff, well, I can just make that network camera, that thing that has the video texture source on it, I can make it grabbable so that anyone can grab it and move it around. I can give it a network transform so that its position is networked, and then that's it. Like now it just does what you expect, because anyone can now grab that thing and move it around. Its position and rotation and scale are going to be networked for everyone to see, and anyone else can grab it because it's its own networked object. And you can have like these nested networked objects that have network state. And then the fact that it happens to be a camera that is transmitting to a screen or whatever, that just, the networking doesn't actually care about that.
It seems like you do need to, when you're adding this video texture source component to an object in say your GLTF, you need a camera on that node or in that node's
The Blender add-on enforces that for you. So like you can only add it to cameras and stuff.
I see.
So yeah, so like that's a way to do it with like literally no additional concepts, which is kind of cool. Now, this does mean that like the way video texture target and video texture source works is like it's pointing at another node in the GLTF. So you couldn't, for example, load the scene. It has this video screen without any other code changes. I mean, like you couldn't right now just like load the GLTF, like load the scene. It has a screen, but like you don't have the camera yet. And then I want to like spawn a camera and attach it to that screen. Nothing like in the code really like makes that invalid, but there's no way to represent that right now. There's no way to like in the GLTF say like, oh, find the screen named this or something. Like it's looking at a specific node in a GLTF file, and so that link has to exist already. But like you could certainly change the code to do that, right? Like you can make a different kind of video texture target or source that like looks for an object that gets created later or something like that to connect between GLTS. But the fact that you can now add network state to things without having to create a new network schema or template or anything like that means that you could just represent this as a single GLTF file.
I see. So in your scene, you'd have a billboard or the big screen, and you'd put video texture target on that, and maybe you'd give it a unique name or identifier or way to find it later.
Oh, you're saying if you wanted to do the
each participant is going to create dynamically a video texture source. You'd have to customize your client for this, right? For doing it right now. Right. But each participant you would like create, when they create their avatar, also create a video texture source, maybe on the same node that their head is on. And then
if you wanted to be able to look out of a participant's view, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then you could have like a thing that is like, oh, a control interface, right? I want to like select, here's all the video texture sources that exist in the scene. I want to like attach this video texture target to that video texture source. And I also want to network that state. I want to network which video texture source do you want to look at? And so I can just say like, okay, like I want to like, and you can make a custom UI for this too, right? Like, okay, I click on this one, I'm going to switch what the screen is showing to just point at that different video texture source. And everyone's client gets that information about like, oh, actually target this source now instead. And so then everyone's client shows a different camera view. You're not like networking the video or anything like that. You're just networking like, how do you make this connection? So you'd have a system that looks for a networked video texture source controller component, whatever, that like its state is just which video source or what's the ID of the source that I want to bind to this video texture target. And if the one I'm looking at right now is different from the one I should be looking at because the network told me to look at it, well then switch it. And If it sounds like I'm just saying the same thing for every one of these questions, it's because I am, and that's a good thing, right? It's like it's just like, okay, well, you look for some component maybe, look for some network state, and then apply that network state. That's like basically how you do everything. And that's good. That it's I'm saying the same things, and that's really nice because that means that the system's really flexible, and it's like you don't really have to come up with weird ways to do things. It's like, okay, it's always the same thing. Just apply, like create some things sometimes, look at some things sometimes tell other people about them if other people have told you about things, make the world like they have said. um,
Yeah, and just kind of following up on that same idea, we have Chris asking about text input and as like sort of the beginning trigger to that. So it probably applies the same way, right?
yeah, like if you wanted to, you have to type something in order to unlock something. Like you can, again, like you can look at when a chat message comes in, you could write a thing that like you'd have to like the tricky part with that is you'd have to like decide who's doing this, whose client is going to be checking for this, maybe. Um,
Can you repeat the question? I didn't understand it.
I think the question was basically how to trigger something from like some text input, right? So like you have to type the password in order for something to happen.
Okay. Is this different from like our slash duck thing? Okay, I'm in here. I can make a command, do something.
Maybe not exactly, but the way I'm thinking about it is it's like it's going to have some effect that, like if we were talking about the thing where it's like, oh, when I put a model into this thing, play some animation or something.
Oh, okay.
It's like you're causing some network thing to happen that is not necessarily just spawning a new entity.
Uh-huh.
And so like someone kind of needs to be responsible for doing that. You don't want everyone to do it. Maybe you could get away with everyone doing it, and then they're all saying to do the same thing, so it's okay.
But not necessarily the person who typed the message.
I guess like their client could be the one that does it. Yeah, like that would I guess that would be pretty simple to do that way. But yeah, like again, it's like, okay, this is just a different thing. It's like, okay, look for when this thing happens and then do some stuff in response. I like
Oh, we don't have text input like in the world, and I think that kind of feels like part of this question, or like a text input that will appear in 2D depending on what's going on in the world.
Not specifically, no. I mean, we have the text component, and you can use that for text input, but it'd be that would be tricky to implement.
That's interesting, though. I have not heard that before. Text input. I'm just going to add this to the list of things to think about. Thanks for that. Cool. Password for an animated door to unlock a new area. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like using a 2D text input would solve some of the problems, just because literally there's no way to we don't have a 3D text input. But then you definitely start to run into issues with cross-platform stuff, right? Because like, okay, how do you do it in VR? We don't have a VR keyboard right now. If you did it in the 2D UI, you could use the system VR keyboard, but well, then you'd have to exit out of VR mode to do it. Maybe you don't care about VR and you're only caring about desktops, and then I would definitely do an input field that pops up when you say you walk near the door, right? The kind of combining the thing we were talking about before, right? This trigger thing. Okay, I walk near the door. When that happens, I just instruct my local client, this isn't a networked thing or anything, to show some React component that's like, oh, enter the password or whatever. And then I type it in, and then I check whether the password is right or something. And then if it is, then I play the door opening animation, and that is like a networked animation mixer. And so when I play it, everyone else sees an update too, and it stays open for everyone who joins later, because the networked animation mixer takes care of that. So I would take ownership of the door animation mixer thing, tell it to play. But like the text input part is separate from the like what do I do part. And like that thing I described wouldn't even necessarily be in a system exactly. Like it's when I type in a password thing, like, well, that's probably just in a React component, right? It's like when I hit enter on this React component, then I want to do something. And what do I want to do? Like that, I want to like, there's a few different ways I can handle what happens next. But I might literally just at that point just set the network state. Like I can do that. I don't think it matters too much where in the frame I am doing that. So like doing that in a React component in a click event is probably fine.
One thing this brings up, which we have thought a little bit about and want to think more about, is what is the tie together? You're in React, you want to query the state of the 3D world, or you want to affect the state of the 3D world. What's like the appropriate interface for doing that?
Yeah, I think what we'll probably do, we'll probably have a set of hooks and stuff that you can use. That's going to be like, use entity, and then it'll be like, it'll give you, or use query, something like that. It'll like give you, it'll re-render this component anytime an enter query changes or something like that. This is really rough in my mind. I don't know exactly how this will work, but we want it to be like, even for our own code, we want it to be nice to work with the state of the world in React. So we'll have to figure out how that all works. Right now, like the way that mostly the A-frame scene communicates with React is just to fire some global events, and then the React stuff just looks for those global events and then updates some state. But we want something a little bit cleaner than that.
Very good. All right. How are we on time? We're past the hour mark, but we said 60 to 90 minutes, so I think we're okay.
Yep.
All right. Room portals.
Yeah. So room portals are actually like, well, it depends on exactly what you mean, but the simplest version of room portals is basically combining the stuff we've talked about before. So like when I enter a thing, I want to just switch rooms. That's like quite easy to do, right? It's like, okay, when I enter this area, just call change hub. Like we have a function called change hub that just changes your room. This is what fast room switching does. And so you just call that function with the new hub ID. So what I would do is probably make like a room portal component or something, or a room trigger, like change room trigger component or something. Then you have a component that's, and I'd give that thing a rigid body with a box that defines an area where this thing, like similar to how media frames work, where it's like, okay, here's the area, and if you step inside this area, like if the like I would check for collisions with this room portal, this entity with this room portal component on it. I would check for collisions with that. If the avatar, if the player's avatar, like the local player's avatar, collides with this thing, then change their hub. That, like, it would be like a quite short system, right? It would just be like, okay, if I'm colliding with the player, then change the hub for them. And the players do have rigid bodies right now, I think. But you would need to like we didn't really talk about this with collision stuff. There's like these collision filter masks and collision groups and stuff, and you have to like make sure that they match up. I think that's a thing we could actually do in a stream at some point. I think would be a useful, like, interactive, like actually implement stream, is to like do one of these trigger volume things. This comes up all the time. So I think we should do that one. Yeah, and maybe even this one. This one would be like the portals. I think would be a pretty easy one to do. Or either this one or the like when a model enters a trigger, do something.
Okay. It would be harder if you wanted a live view of the other room.
Yeah.
Maybe it's possible to load the other room in an iframe.
I wouldn't do it
in
like
a
that.
mode.
I think I would just like okay, so like there's like the visual representation of the portal, right? So like I said that you create an entity that's going to have this rigid body and whatever. Okay, I want that to also display something. one thing you could do is just display like the preview image from that scene. Like every scene, like if you paste a scene or a room link into Discord or something, you'll see the embed has a thing. And if we really wanted to do this, what you would also do is like probably give a room a 360 photo also, right? As a separate property that you could associate with a room. And then I would probably just display in that the visual representation of this portal, I would just display a 360 thing that, as I move around, I'm looking at a different part of the 360 photo. Like this would be just custom visual work, but like it's not specific to like hubs or anything. It's just like the same way you would do it in 3JS. I'd have to figure out the exact how you do it. If you wanted like literally a live view into the scene, that's like way more complicated, right? Because it's like I think what you probably want to do is like actually load both scenes. The hub's client's like totally not set up for this. I don't know exactly how you would do it. I would probably do the 360 image thing because you also performance wise, I don't think would want to actually have both scenes loaded.
Yeah, it might be nice, and Matt suggested this when we were talking about this one, like even if it's the fast room switch, it would be nice if when you are close to a portal, and maybe only if someone explicitly sets this up, you like start loading that scene. Even if you might not
data and stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's basically just making fast room switching even faster and even better. I would like to get to the point where fast room switching or like loading scenes or maybe only loading a part of a scene are all these configurable things. Like in games, if you're going from one part of the environment to the next, you might notice that you have to like walk down a long hallway where your view is obstructed by walls, and that's because like what you can't see is like the old level is unloading and the new level is loading, and that takes some amount of time, and so they just like do that in the background while you're walking down this hallway that you can't see past.
Right, and I think like that can be separate from room switching. Even like that's just kind of like dynamic loading of parts of the environment or whatever. Paradowski's actually implemented this on their Hubs Cloud instance. They have like a whole system for defining zones, and they split their scenes up because they have these sometimes very large scenes. Like you can see this in Apart Posters, like the HD remaster of Apart Posters. They have this whole basement area where you walk down this spiral staircase, and then there's a whole new kind of GLTF that gets loaded down there, and it works very similar to what you just described. It's like, okay, well, when I enter this area, then start loading this other model and then you can unload also everything upstairs. And this is not a system we have in place, but like it's certainly one that you could build, right? It's like, okay, an environment is actually not just this one thing. It's like made up of like multiple sub GLTFs and whatnot. This is separate from room portals because you're not actually switching rooms at that point. You're just switching parts of the scene. But
yeah, there's like two. The room part would be like who am I connected to, and also like
the room is the scene but in the fast room switching code, for example, already we make a distinction between if you're switching to another room and that room has the same scene, we don't try to load the scene or anything, and we also don't even fade out and fade back in. We just like literally just switch which room you're connected to. So like if I have two avatars standing near me and then I would walk into one of these room portals, or I'd click a fast room switching thing, those two avatars would just disappear, and then like whoever's in this new room might just appear next to me.
Right.
But like the scene doesn't change because the scene was not a different GLTF file, so we didn't have to reload it.
That's all I mean. I just mean like while we're thinking about portals, because Matt mentioned they come up a lot. Like I hope we get to a point where we disambiguate all these things because people are changing rooms for different reasons. It's because they want to break up a complex scene into sub-scenes, or they want to change who they're connected to. They want to like scale out. I have 100 people. I need them to spread out somehow. So I need 4 rooms or 5 rooms or something like that. And hopefully we can just, like my dream scenario is 100 people are in the room or 1,000 people are in the room. I'm loading the avatars who are near me. I'm loading the part of the scene that I can see. as I move through the scene, I'm connecting to different people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Next one, Sumeet, same
join.
person asks room join trigger component. Do something when someone joins a room.
Yeah, so like this one, this isn't even necessarily a component. When someone joins the room, you can find out about that happening. I forget exactly. We have an event that like the Phoenix yeah, there's a hub join thing
hub
on
join. Message dispatch. Receive join.
I think it's right there, right?
Yeah, this is so like if I want to do another one that doesn't care about noisy occupants and things. What is
Well,
this
you do care about that.
key?
Oh yeah, the noisy
Hide
occupants.
hubs. I don't care about that. Key is this session ID. I don't know what that checks. Oh, that's like for if I'm the one
If
joining.
you're the one joining, yeah.
I can do new client connected.
Right. And then like just do whatever you want there. And hub leave is similar when someone leaves. This is how, like, for example, like the UI, the people list and stuff is updated, I think.
I think so. This message dispatch thing, the type join and the presence. Actually, I'm not sure. I don't know if it looks directly at present state or
presences, but we can look at it. Either way,
I want to like just demo this real quick where I'm going to pull in a new client and I should see in my log when this bottom client joins.
Now
I get
this
this
will
message.
just be when you join the hub,
joined.
not enter the scene. Like entering and joining are different things. So you would then have to look at their present state to like decide that they have entered.
Yeah, we have that too. We have hub, like a change to the hub if their present state changed and now it's room. So like, okay, we could do that. Okay, if their previous presence, if it changed, if it did not change, then we won't do anything. And if it's me, actually, this is it, right? This is new client entered the room.
I would take off the query parameter that makes you automatically enter so that you can show it.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
But yeah, so like not everything has to be systems and components and whatever, right? It's like just do the appropriate. You shouldn't have reloaded the top one.
It was auto reload because I got the. Okay, so all right, client left. New client connected. So that was that's in HubJs where I was just adding that new code. Oops, wow. I need to make this bigger. And when this bottom client actually does get into the room, I should see new client entered the room. And we can, so you can, this is in hub.js, and you can look at these hub change and hub join events depending on which one you want.
Yeah, and so what I was saying is like not everything has to be a system or has to have components or whatever. I mean, like just do the appropriate thing for what you're doing. Generally, if you're thinking about something that's happening every frame or whatever, like a system is probably the right way to do it. And like if you want to attach behavior to a GLTF file, like components are the right way to do that. But like if you like, this is still also just a program that is doing stuff. And so like if you want to do something when someone enters, that's just, well, do something when you get notified about something when someone enters. And then like sometimes it's like, okay, what we're going to do when someone enters is add a component to something so that then something can happen every frame or whatever. But you also do have to think about like, okay, whose perspective, like this code is running on every client. So like if I'm wanting to do something when like I want to add a component to every avatar as like to my own avatar, like you wouldn't do that here because this is talking about other people joining. So like you don't want every client to be doing something every time someone like if you're doing something for your own avatar, that's maybe not what you're doing. Anyway, you can. How about adding an auto instancing for events when you just get? I think this was about the previous. There's a thing in chat about this is talking about the previous thing, I think. So
okay, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen people do like automatically assigning of rooms and stuff based on the amount of people in the room or whatever, and like they just do that externally to anything within Hub. Since a Hub's room is just a link, I can decide like when I go to a URL to like enter this, when I click enter, like enter the conference or whatever, I can just look at, okay, I have these 20 rooms available to put people into. I can use the API to figure out how many people are in this room and then like assign that person to a room based on that. Like that's before I even load the Hub client at all. Kind of externally, I can decide where do I want to send someone. Yeah, yeah, like triggering changes based on time. It's kind of a cool idea. And like so, like that avatar.
I just realized I'm muted. Sorry, I want to keep talking about before we move on to this.
No, sure.
I'd love for us to have better ways to do it than just okay. When you join, you go into a different instance of the room, because what you don't want to have happen is okay. You're throwing this event. Lots of people indicated that they're interested. They showed up on time, and then, well, like a lot of them actually only had like 10 minutes to check it out, and
Right.
and so you spun up three rooms, yeah, and they're all half empty or like a third full, right? And then what you kind of want is everyone who can fit into that room. You want to have like smarter rules about where people are connected.
Well, and even like you want to have like looser concepts about what a room is, right? Like,
yeah,
you want to be able to like, because a room is really just a scene and a dialogue room, like a dialogue server that you're connected to.
Mm-hmm.
So like in theory, you could imagine things where it's like, okay, I could have sub rooms of a room or something like that, where it's just like, okay, these are all the same scene, it's all the same conceptual room, but there's like different layers of reality to that room, whatever. Like, right, it's like just the different dialogue rooms, and like those can be like very freely moved around. So it's like, okay, well, now we have 2 rooms with 10 people, or 2 sub rooms with 10 people in them. Let's merge them. And so suddenly you see 10 other people just appear next to you, because like the rooms have been combined or something. And like maybe a little chat message says like, "Oh, welcome. You've been rated by the other."
I want to subscribe to data streams for each avatar that are connected to like the large room, and I only want to inflate 3D models for the ones that I can see, and I only want to connect to voice streams of the ones that I could realistically hear and keep my frame rate up.
Yeah. So that's like future stuff. I don't know exactly what we're going to do there, but it's definitely stuff worth thinking about. There was another thing. Oh yeah, like the avatar change a tire after a certain time thing. Like the interesting thing to mention there though, like that's what I was mentioning, where you want to think about who should be doing this, right? So you might think, okay, I want to do this like time thing, and after this time, I'm going to like change all the avatars in the scene to a different model. That would be the wrong way to do it, because then everyone is going to decide, okay, it's past this time, and then everyone will try to change everyone else's avatar or whatever like that. And you don't want that. What you want is every client locally is checking, okay, like, should I become a new avatar? And then then they see like, oh yes, it's past the time. I will become a new avatar, and then they, oh my god, what is this?
This is amazing. I've never seen this. This is Matt tweeted this. Has anyone done time-based progressive avatars concept? You're at wherever you are at in your workday in the world, your avatar updates. That's amazing. That's
like that.
so good.
Like that.
We can absolutely do this, Matt. We should pair, and you should implement this. I will happily sit behind your shoulder while you do this.
That's cool.
Wow. Wow.
Cool. I think we have like 2 more things. Let's get through them really quickly so that we can finish it in the hour.
Okay, so Leonardo is asking about a sequence of buttons to be clicked in order to unlock a path.
Right. So
I think this is very similar to the.
Yeah, we've talked about like the path part of it, but like how would I do a sequence of buttons? The way I would do a sequence of buttons is just like a sort of state machine sort of thing. So it's like, okay, in the system, I keep track of like what state am I in. The state I'm in to start with is I've clicked none of the buttons. Then when I click one of the buttons, I say, okay, if I was in state, I've clicked none of the buttons, and then I click button A, then now I'm in like, okay, like and say I wanted to enter them in a certain sequence. I wanted to enter A, B, C, right? If I'm in the state where I haven't clicked anything and I click A, then advance to state A. If I click anything else, doesn't matter. I'm still in the nothing state. Okay, now if I'm in the A state, if I click B, advance to the C state. If I click anything else, that's like the wrong input. So go back to the I've clicked nothing state. And then if I click, and then if I'm in the C state, or if I'm in the B state and I click the C button, well, that was the right thing to do. So now do your like play your sound and open the path and do whatever you want to do. If I click anything else, again, reset back to that previous, like the original state. And if you wanted that to be networked, so that like, if like everyone is working together to click these buttons in the right order, then you just network that state I'm talking about. If you wanted it to only be local, that would just be a local state. But that's kind of the rough way to do it. And now you would probably not want to necessarily hard code these states, and so you'd like make a general thing of like, oh, I want a sequence and check the sequence or whatever. But like the rough thing you're doing is basically just moving through a state machine. And then what you do once you get to a certain state is up to you, right? And again, it's like the same kind of stuff before. Though, like, I guess a lot of these questions have been like a different if this then that sort of thing, and like you can pick and choose the if part and the then that part, from different things. We've definitely talked about like we want this to be something you could probably do without writing code to at some point, where it's like I should be able to like in my Blender file say like, when I click this thing, play this animation on this other thing, or when I enter this thing, play this video. But like the first part of that is like, okay, how would you do it in code? And then making a system that is like a generic over that is much the same thing we've been talking about, but just, you know, like you would configure it with component data instead. And yeah, we haven't like one of the reasons we haven't implemented this stuff yet is because like we've known for a very long time that we want to do this work we're doing now to simplify things. And so we didn't want to build on top of the foundations that we knew we were going to change. And like also we didn't really want other people doing it too, unless they were like really dedicated to doing it, right? Like we wanted people to like, we definitely want people to build on top of hubs, and we wanted people to do it, but like we haven't made it particularly easy to do, or like really gone out of our way to like
provide documentation and tutorials and like okay, here's how you should be doing this, because unfortunately, like a lot of the code that you would have to write to get some of this stuff done is code that we'd really prefer if there was a better way to write it, and there will be a better way to write it very soon. Like, you know, I didn't want to say this, so it would like, I don't want to tell anyone, the best way to implement that is to wait 3 months and then implement it in this easier way. But for some
It's
things that
for certain
might be
things.
easier, especially if what you're doing is kind of for your own learning and entertainment. Like you can be working off of the branches we're working on. It's not going to be super stable, but it'll save you the trouble of 6 months from now. You've like written all this A-frame components, and then like actually we've like removed most of A-frame, and you're left in the old world when you want to be in the new world.
Right, and I do want to say, for people who already have existing A-frame stuff, the plan is to keep A-frame itself in hubs so that you can keep your A-frame code.
Yeah.
But we're not going to be like up, as we're migrating stuff, like we're gonna like try not to break existing things as much as we can, but like we're certainly not going to be like adding features so that you can build on A-frame stuff. Like that's not the plan.
Right. That'll have to come in with your custom client if you're building new and more A-frame stuff.
And the way we're doing it like does try to merge the two worlds as much as possible and make it so that you can interop with them. Like you'll see we went over this in the first stream we did, but we have this thing like A-frame to bit component or something. Like that thing where it's like we still have A-frame versions of some bit ECS components so that you can like use them from A-frame land. So like the is remote hover target stuff, right? For example, like the interaction system that like is detecting what you're hovering over and stuff, that has already moved over to bit ECS. Like that is just looking at entities and deciding what to do based on just the entities. And every A-frame thing is also a bit ECS entity now. So the hovering system and whatnot is just concerned with bit ECS. It doesn't know anything about A-frame. But you can still make your A-frame entities work with this like sort of little proxy component we have. And all this component does is just when you add this component, it adds the bit ECS component. And when you remove that component, it removes the bit ECS component. Like you can see like that implementation right there is the entire implementation of the A-frame component. And so you can still kind of bridge your existing A-frame code into bit ECS land, and kind of the other way around too. Like if like you'll see we have stuff, if you search for A entity, we have stuff in our new systems that are like, yeah, but if it's an A-frame component, do something a little bit special. Like just say has component A entity. It's like, okay, sometimes we want to do something a little special. Like media frames do this, for example. Media frames right now are written in the new system, but what media frames capture is A-frame entities only, actually. And so you can still like, it was important to us for just writing this for ourselves that like we're able to migrate this over time. And so it's going to be the same thing. If you have a lot of A-frame code, like you shouldn't expect that you're going to have to like, okay, one day you're just going to have to like just rewrite the entire thing all at once. You're going to want to do it in pieces, kind of how we're doing it. And it's probably worth starting to think about how to do it now, at the very least, if not to start actually doing it. I think some of this stuff is still pretty up in the air. So like I wouldn't necessarily go about rewriting everything now, but I would start experimenting with it.
And sharing how that goes, because like it will inform how we write documentation. We might be able to help you think about problems. You might help us be informed of certain pain points in the migration.
Like when I say that things change, it's because as we're migrating stuff and as we're implementing stuff, we're like, actually we haven't accounted for that, or that's like really difficult to represent. We should split up inflators into two things, or whatever. Like things change because we find out that things are hard, or not, that we haven't quite come up with the right abstraction yet or something. So finding out what you guys run into when you try to convert your own systems is certainly going to help us figure out how to make the right things.
Okay. We are on the last few. So a timer that teleports to the user, bring everyone to me. Like, okay, in 30 seconds, everyone should be teleported to me.
I think that's very similar to the timer thing we talked about before. So see the one about how to make the timer, and then all that's different is when the timer expires, well, then I want to do something. And what I want to do is make everyone teleport to me. I guess I would probably right now do that by just sending them a message. Like you can just send a message that just says, teleport here or something like that. That's probably what I would do.
Maybe you talked about sending a message. I don't think we have an example of this
We don't have an
that I
example
can
of it because the
think
way to
of.
do it right now is with NAF. And I'd like to have a function that you call in the new networking system to do it. But like, all of the new networking system is actually just sending a message over NAF right now. We do have a sort of example of this. The pen in the old code anyway, the pen system is all based on just message sending of custom messages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But basically you would just send you call right now you just call like naf dot or send message in the new netcode system, or like broadcast message if I want to send it to everyone or something. And then I would just like send it, and then you would get it, and then you'd say like on message, this kind of message, like do a thing. And right, so when I get that message, then I'll just teleport myself. I think that's how I would implement it, is just like tell everyone to teleport themselves. I'm trying to think about what, because I don't think I want to try to move their avatars. That's, in order to do that, I have to take ownership of their avatar, and then there's like not a good way to give it back so that then their movement is like they're still controlling their own movement.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I would just tell them to teleport themselves. Cool.
And then you'd probably want like just like some generic receive. So like if you receive a thing,
yeah, like on message, you have a thing. Yeah, like
or on message.
and then that thing would probably have arguments. It's like, okay, where am I teleporting to, and whatnot. That would be part of the data. But yeah. Let's move on to the
All right.
last thing you wanna-
Okay, last one. Trigger, have a trigger for animating objects, like projecting a ball for a cannon fire trigger that will shoot something from a cannon. I think this is very similar to what we talked about before. You want like a clickable thing on a model. You want to have networked animation state for that model.
Well, and then this is also probably like, okay, this is going to fire the ball, right? So I would network instantiate, like I would say, create networked entity. Like, so, okay, I would click the cannon. When I click the cannon, like I have a system that looks for when you click on the cannon. When you click on it, I would play the cannon animation to do the firing, whatever. And then as part of that animation, or after that animation completes, or during that animation, I also spawn a networked entity, so that everyone sees this cannonball spawn. And then the cannonball itself probably has some behavior to do whatever, some interesting stuff. But what I could do is, you just apply, like it's going to have a rigid body. I set its velocity and stuff, and I set it off in a direction. We're still working on the networked physics stuff in the new world is still a bit incomplete, in that the network transform system doesn't do any sort of lerping and stuff. So like seeing other people's objects is going to look kind of laggy and stuff if they're the ones controlling the physics for it. If maybe you don't care about the actual position of this thing, right? Like you just want to fire off this cannonball, and the fact that where it lands exactly doesn't matter to you for that to be networked, right? You just care that like, okay, this cannonball is going to fire off in a direction, and it's going to like behave with physics. What I might do then is create the networked entity, but don't give that a network transform, right? It has the networked entity. The prefab for that thing is a cannonball, and it has a rigid body, and I set its initial velocity or whatever, or its initial acceleration in a direction. And so when I spawn it, every client locally is going to like shoot that thing off with the physics system. But like The position is not networked because I don't actually care that everyone sees it the same. I'm just doing this as a visual effect or something, right? And so it's not important to me that everyone sees the cannonball go to the same spot. So all I'm networking is the fact that I created this thing, and then every client will actually handle the physics itself. And so I can do that either with this create networked entity thing if I care about everyone doing it, or again, it could be like this message thing where I just say like, hey, fire a cannonball from this spot locally, create an entity and do it locally, because I don't care about someone who joins late. I don't want them to then fire the cannonball from that spot, and I don't have to want to worry about deleting the networked entity for everyone or whatever. So again, could be another message thing. Like the message thing is not something we've really explored very much. We've mostly, because most of all the networked objects we have in hubs right now are not of that type. They're more of the like, this is a synchronized network object thing. But there's certainly things where I just want to tell the other client to do stuff. So this is pretty typical in any sort of game networking system. You might have like a way to synchronize state and then a way to just like fire off an RPC, like fire off a function on the other client. So this is something we'll definitely want to have.
All right, that's everything that people had talked about. I was the one who added this escape the room games because I'm very excited about it, and I think getting to the point where people are building good escape the room games on top of hubs and hopefully even productizing them, like it's on your own website and it's got its special brand, and like you sign up with your friends and you pay $5 and like you go in there and you have a grand old time. That's like basically a combination of all the techniques and the things people are asking for, and I'm really, really motivated to get us there, to help us get, do my part, and Dom will do his part and Matt will do his part. Everyone will do their part, and then together we will get these like very entertaining games